those people, this group, this large, this at least 50 and up percent of us say yes, you should be able to arm yourself. Absolutely, totally fine. A lot of Democrats in Congress, I'm sure, that own guns, right? A lot of people who vote for Democrats who own guns.
I think
A lot of
most of the
people.
Dems in Congress, they don't own guns. They have people who own guns defending them because they're rich
Well,
bitches.
like I said,
And actually, gun control in the United States is bigoted. That it is partially racist in origin. It originates with the Cruikshank decision in 1876, which was pioneered by the Ku Klux Klan, of all groups of people, among the Southern Democrats. And actually, I see a little bit of an overlap now with one of the arguments that's being made before the Supreme Court as we speak, which has to do with concealed carry, which is that New York and New Jersey that don't want to have to issue licenses for concealed carry to people. One of their justifications, this was actually made in oral arguments with regards to this case, was that people might shoot each other on the subway, et cetera, et cetera. The insinuation is that the brown people, the lower classes, are more violent, should not be armed, because if they do have a gun on them, that they will be more violent, they will kill each other. And I find it very, very strange, actually, that most of the proponents, it seems, at least in the craptivistic sense, of gun control, they ignore Cruikshank, which is the basis of the U.S. gun control, again, Ku Klux Klan sponsored in part. And they're making effectively the same arguments. They're making the same arguments today that they made in the 19th century. It is partially predicated on wanting the lower classes and or the brown people not to be armed because there is a paranoia among that class of people. The Brian Griffin sweater-wearing, NPR cup-holding liberals, number one, and the politicians, number two, who often have their own private militias, effectively, their own security guards, who are not subject to the same gun control. I would say the idea of banning what you would conceive of, Jack, as assault rifles is asinine because they are not weapons of war. They're not military style in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it was funny. It was only a week ago. I can't remember exactly which Democratic House candidate made this point. He was talking about the AR-15 and hunting rifles, supposedly. And it's interesting because the Henry rifle that he held up as the standard of a hunting rifle that should be allowed to all the people is actually used by the U.S. military as recently as the war in Afghanistan. The AR-15 is not used by any standing army. It has become the boogeyman, ultimately, of the left wing with regards to guns. And other than hog hunting and a few other applications, is not actually a high-capacity, high-powered weapon at all. It's chambered in .556, which is an intermediate round. I find it also funny, Jack, you're a big fan of Joe Biden. I've been monitoring your Twitter for a few days here, and you seem
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you seem to support Joe Biden, generally speaking. We won't even talk about his approval polling. We'll push that to the side right now.
Oh,
it's very interesting. Well, it's interesting because it wasn't that long ago that he also, and I don't know whether this was dementia or whether he meant to do this, was opining on 9mm rounds as well. And in combination with his shtick with regards to so-called high-capacity magazines, which do not exist. Anything under 15 rounds is rather a low-capacity magazine. It's pre-modern, effectively. Would effectively outlaw a bunch of guns that have nothing to do with the AR-15. They're not even rifles. They have nothing to do with military. They have nothing to do with militarization. They're not even tactical. You look at some of the tactical pistols, at least they look cool. They may not function any better than a standard sidearm, a standard handgun, but at the very least, they look the part. We're talking about old-style handguns, sometimes almost 100 years old, and even those under such proposals would be banned.
I've seen a lot of people talking about the influence of the NRA, and it was prominent up to 2018, 2019, and a little bit 2020. But I think, if we're going to be messaging, and by us, I say Democrats, I know that's obviously not yourself. I think, moving away from talking about the NRA should be important because it's just an organization without any real authority right now.
You're preaching to the choir on the NRA. They're a bunch of cucks. Gun owners of America are much better. The NRA absolutely.
Well, I'm glad we can agree on the NRA being terrible.
Yes. The NRA wants to disarm certain groups of people. for various reasons. And like most conservative groups, they don't actually want to promote gun rights as per the Second Amendment. They want to stymie any further abuse of the Second Amendment by individuals that hate it even more than the last generation of anti-gunners, and just freeze gun control. So there will come a time, if we were to go by their metric, there would be a time 50 years from now when the head of the NRA, which would be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez by that point, would hold up a BB gun and say, "From my cold dead hands, you're not going to take the 20-shot capacity away from my pellet rifle." Yes, of course, I oppose them as cucks. Again, though, I must point out, the history of gun control in the United States begins in the 1870s, as you correctly and succinctly point out, and it was racist. It was explicitly to disarm former slaves. That has been the case up until even now. When we look at the arguments made by the states of New York and New Jersey with regards to concealed carry, which may be decided literally tomorrow, and I can't wait to live stream on that. It's going to be orgasmic. Some of their arguments boil down to the rabble of poor people, the rabble of brown people in general in these urban areas will get guns and they will be violent with them if we don't restrict concealed carry. And that's just one tip of the iceberg argument that we really have on this subject.
And if you have a gun in your household, it's more likely to be, a victim of
not my guns
violence in some form.
I've got four.
Well, I'm hoping you keep them safe. But
the thing is, this is actually a weapon of war. This is a cavalry saber. This is a weapon of war. The AR-15's never been used by a standing army in the history of the world. So you should qualify that.
Are you pretty good with that? With your with the sword?
Yes.
Well, wait, I want to make sure, Jack. Do you agree with what Styx said, that the AR-15 is not a weapon of war, as a weapon of war is defined?
Name a military that uses it.
I disagree. I do. So the terms that you want to use for describing it, if you want me to find a different way to label the weapon itself.
Has the weapon ever been used in war by a standing military? Yes or no?
So again, what I'm talking about is a weapon that's able to tear apart flesh in a military style manner. And
no, it's not. I wish it were. I'd get several of them.
Any regular person to need to own.
So in other words, well, if the AR-15 is a flesh-tearing, baby-killing, horrendous, object of war,
which
you would have to effectively
historically it is. You say this like we're talking about it in the abstract of what it can.
You're using emotional language. It tears kids apart.
We've seen what it has done, and that's the difference. Is that we've seen what it has done, and we've seen that this is the weapon of choice for those who wish to commit mass murders. This is their weapon of choice.
No, you're thinking of the AK-47.
Why is this so?
Why you're thinking of the AK-47 actually used by communist regimes to execute 100 million people after disarming them.
But why a shooter in Buffalo with their manifesto, and then the shooter in Uvalde who pretty much copied it word for word to go on?
That's the power of the legacy media, baby. They encourage violence because it's good clickbait, including your friends at Midas Touch and the Lincoln Project. Anyway, AR-15 is not an assault weapon. It's not an assault weapon.
It does not require these types of weapons. Your
boy Joe Biden said that if someone tries to break down your door, you should just open fire through the door with a shotgun. Now this shows.
When's that Joe Biden quote from? Was that like
Joe
yesterday?
Biden, I believe it was from 2018, if I remember correctly.
It was from 2018.
I believe so.
Well,
somebody fact check.
Joe Biden has progressed a lot since then. So.
Yeah, he's progressed in his dementia. That's for sure. Can I unleash a few quotes here to?
I appreciate that. I said I think he's progressed on the positions he takes on issues.
Oh yeah, so Washington Examiner, real quick.
They're not going to be able to, but yes, I believe that some of these individuals would like that. They live in gated communities and penthouses with private security. They are afraid of some random brown person on the subway airing them out. As many liberals are, they're racist. Cruikshank was bigoted. The arguments being made before SCOTUS with regards to concealed carry by the leftoid states that are fielding them, they're bigoted explicitly. I find it's very funny. Liberals will also say, well, once brown people start buying guns, then there will be action. That's funny because I seem to recall earlier this year there was a group of Black Panthers by the hundreds marching with their AR-15s, those uber scary military weapons, and nobody did jack shit about it. There were no shootings. There was no violence. They marched down the street. Who cares? I hope they buy more weapons.
Why? When did your fascination? I want to dive into this because I've never very much
Trying to
been
do
able to understand
psychology
it.
on me
No.
is a losing proposal.
Some comments. I'm looking at the comment section a little bit. I don't know what clank means, but I've seen some people say that this is still a decent debate. Like I said, I don't think the bill is perfect. I don't. So
No, it shouldn't be
I said
passed
that.
at all.
Well, I think I'd like to see more. Who are the senators that you do enjoy their work? I'm guessing like what? Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz.
Fuck Ted Cruz. I like Rand Paul.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's get a little bit deeper. Let's get a little bit deeper into
my
this.
old nemesis.
Well, I'm fine with fuck Ted
Yeah.
Cruz. I'm perfectly on board.
I
with
would-
that.
But Jack, can you steelman Styx's argument for if we imagine the worst case scenario of why a militia would be required here? Can you steelman Styx's argument as to why 18-year-olds should be able to have this kind of weaponry?
Why are you asking what this scenario would be?
Yes, the whole point, the whole reason as to why the 18-year-olds would be allowed or should be allowed to have this
There
kind of
is
weaponry.
one.
So should the draft age be raised to 21?
Are you saying
Should the age to vote be raised to 21?
No, because that's not a dangerous thing. Well, actually, you could say
Voting's
it's
not
potentially a
dangerous?
thing. I think
Holy
you could say
shit.
it's a potentially dangerous thing, depending on who you're voting for. If you're voting for Rand Paul, maybe so.
I can't
But
vote
I'd
for him,
say-
unfortunately. I'm not in Kentucky, so I have to vote for Bernie Sanders or whatever punching bag he runs against. It's very sad.
Do you vote for Bernie? Do you just kind
I
of get
wouldn't.
in?
I'm not going to vote for Bernie Sanders. He's over the hill and crazy.
Okay. I saw
He
him.
sold out and decided to buy a third home.
Mm.
But no, the militia is explicitly defined as people who are of voting age up, who are of able body, not currently incarcerated or criminal lunatics.
And well regulated,
The problem-
I'd state as well.
Yes, regulated, well able to function. 1700s parlance, not the same as the current meaning.
And being regulated, right?
Well, let's
Yes,
get into
like
that
a
meaning of
well-regulated
regulated.
diet. I can
If we talk
regulate
about
my
the-
diet. I don't need the government to do it for me.
Yeah.
Well, the
Regulated
government
means
does do it for you.
No, but just
No,
to
the
be clear,
government-
Jack,
the
it's not-
government is government left.
Yes,
government
go on.
regulation is regulation, but it is subject to the concept of regulation. That is, regulation is an overarching concept. Government regulation is one component of it. We know that the militia can involve soldiers because there were no soldiers in the United States when the Second Amendment was ratified. And we know that the militia encompasses the people at large because, of course, there is a literal reference to this from multiple founders. I've got quotes here if I need to use them. Well regulated in the 18th century had nothing to do with government regulation. It had to do with the regulation of mechanisms. So the militia as a body of people, a militia capable of mustering, the able-bodied people who owned their own weapons, self-evident within the Second Amendment, is regulated by themselves. They regulate themselves. It's just like a machine. To regulate it doesn't mean the government comes in and repairs the machine. The machine is
weapons
well
were they
able to
owning?
function. Huh?
What weapons were they owning?
Weapons of war, literal ones.
Yeah. Similar legislation to that of which we've seen in other countries, which has been extremely proven ineffective, is what we should implement.
They don't have a Second Amendment. It's not applicable. Some of those nations are islands. I love it when people talk about the Australian gun buyback and don't realize it's kind of hard to run guns into a country if you have to have a naval capability to do so. Little bit more different than walking across Biden's porous southern border where he invites people, cartel members in, and then gives them automatic weapons like Fast and Furious. Your own government doesn't even take this concept seriously. We were running automatic weapons, literal machine guns down to Sinaloa not that long ago, and it killed a border agent. And that same government told you that you don't need more than 10 shots in your locker. We're sending billions of dollars in weapons to Ukraine right now. Those civilians, perfectly fine. They should own every machine gun, missiles, tanks. Those are good. Those are good people. Exactly. Those people, they're perfectly allowed to own all of these weapons. But American citizens, oh my God, we can't trust them with this fucking AR-15.
I have a quick question
I think
for
that's
Jack.
crazy. In fact, if you want to have a good military, it makes sense to have a well-armed populace that's capable of using weapons because they need less training. It's a lot cheaper.
Why
This
does
is
why
one of
don't-
the
why
reasons
don't-
we did kicked ass.
Why
in
don't
World
other
War II.
countries do it then? Why is it?
I don't
why
care
is
about
this
what other countries do.
Why
I
is
don't
this
give a
strictly an
shit.
American issue?
Because we've got a Second Amendment, and the concept of the militia is a departure from the old world. When the United States was founded, we essentially said, fuck the old European old world system because it clearly doesn't work. They have state
Fuck letting
religions.
kids go to school without worrying about being shot.
Okay. Yeah, tell that to the third worlders. They have state religions. They're constantly censoring the press. People have to ask permission to defend themselves.
Tell that to Norway.
Japan is an island. Japan is an island. Little bit easier to stymie gun sales now, isn't it, when they have to come in by boat or plane, as opposed to coming across the porous southern Mexican border in the United States. Guns mainly going in the other direction. It's the CIA's cocaine that mainly comes north. We sell them machine guns in return and then tell American citizens they're not allowed to have their Glock anymore. 9mm is a scary round. It'll turn people into meat burgers and make them into sausages. I'd have to quote mine. I've got quotes here about what the militia means. I didn't want to have 20 quotes.
If you have any quotes from John Adams, then that could go a little bit of ways and maybe.
Well, I mean, John Adams was the Alien and Sedition Act bullshitter, so I don't give a shit about what he said. George Washington said that the people should maintain proper arms in order to resist tyranny, including their own government. So I'll just take
the tyranny that they wanted to resist was the people to the west whose land that they took. I think that's what.
No, it was their own British government, actually. The regulars.
No.
Yeah, that was what they were fighting.
I think it was the natives who were tyranny. The natives who we had to defend against.
Total revisionism here. Now that is one hell of a revisionist stretch. They made it quite clear that it was the regulars from their own government in Britain that they had a problem with. That's why we departed from the Euro system. Yeah, they were afraid of being attacked by Native Americans, up to and including the fact that when they tried to disarm the colonists, that's one of the reasons why they didn't want to be disarmed, because they faced invasion from hostile so-called native forces on a regular basis. The British came along and said,
who had their land taken from them.
Fuck that. That's a totally separate argument. Well, they were taking each other's land for thousands of years, but we'll get past that for just now because it's a bait argument.
But it wasn't ours.
Which tribe? Native American, which tribe? It's just like saying, oh, these Italians invaded the French, but they're both white, so it's basically the same. Stop confusing ethnicity with race for a moment, but that's a bait argument, and I'm not taking the line.
And in countries where these weapons are more difficult to get, you see fewer of these mass shootings.
You see plenty of violent crimes and murders in these countries. It's just that people have to use something other than firearms. I love how you always. I love how the anti-gunners, by the way, always fixate on just Western Europe and Oceania as comparisons. They never compare it to the vast bulk of the entire rest of the developing or undeveloped world, where guns are variably available or unavailable. They never look at the statistics there.
Are we a developed country?
Why does that matter?
What do you want our comp to be?
Yes, why does the topic matter?
Yes, it absolutely does.
Why would the development index matter in regards to gun availability? If guns are the cause of the violence, then we should look at third world nations where guns are only available to militiamen, to actual militaries, or to the government, and we should say, God, nobody else has guns. They should be really peaceful. Or do you want to drag a racial premise into it, perhaps? Because it's not about money. We don't see a huge discrepancy between poor and rich people in the Western world and their relative gun violence. So it's not wealth. Is it the availability of weapons? Because they're not generally available to the general population in most of the world. And you have half the countries in the world have much more gun crime. You have mass murders and genocides.
It's the availability of weapons.
So then all of those purges
that they require.
So then all of those
background checks that they require.
So then all of those purges in the third world, they don't mean anything because they're brown people, right? Just like with Crookshank. Yes, I think that the lily white gated community liberals like yourself, there's a bigoted impetus at some point.
Well, Jack, how familiar are you with Latin America, with places in the third world that have strict gun policies?
But again, I don't know why that's the comp. I don't know why we're trying to make that the comp.
The what?
The comparison.
Yeah, you don't want to compare it to those countries, only the ones with lower gun crime. I wonder why. Well, it's not the availability of guns. You're claiming that, but yet guns are virtually unavailable. Look at Mexico. There's one gun store licensed in the whole
country
of
is
Mexico.
the United States more comparable to?
Well, any of them for the matter of gun availability. They're either available or they're not. Switzerland, guns are available. Everyone has guns. Mexico, there's one gun store in the whole country. Why don't we make that comparison? You see, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. You want to fix it only for developed countries.
I just think jumping to, oh, well, Venezuela is just such a ridiculous point to make at the end of this thing, trying to bring your argument together. I just don't think that's strong, because that's such a cop-out.
Why?
That's not the discussion that we've been having.
Your premise. Why is it a cop-out? Why should it not be
because
compared
that's not
to that
the
country
discussion that we've been having. We've been having a discussion about these, about our country.
Yeah. You're trying to compare it to Finland. I'm trying to compare it to a different country. What's the difference? What are the Finns more like? They're more like the United States.
Comparisons that I've made are of countries where weapons were available, not at a level in the United States, because no, I don't.
Okay, they're virtually unavailable in most of the undeveloped world. So unless you're making an economic argument and saying poverty is causing crime, which clearly is not the case, at least for the most part in the U.S. outside of a few blighted inner city areas, then the comparison is just as apt. Why can you compare it to Norway or to England, and I can't compare it to Venezuela or Colombia? It's because it undermines your argument, and that's really the sum and substance.
Countries that have implemented stricter gun regulations.
So like Mexico, there's one gun store in the whole country, dude. Venezuela, you do not have a gun unless you're part of the Chavezista sort of movement. You're a commie, you're a party member, you're one of their partisans. What about all of these other countries, Zimbabwe or something? No, you can't have a gun unless you get direct permission from the government or you're currently in the military. They've got extreme gun control. I love it when people say, well, the libertarian homeland should be Somalia. Try getting a gun in Somalia unless you're a terrorist. So the only people that have guns, criminals in the government. Well, it should be really great. There shouldn't be any crime there. Why is there genocide there? I don't understand it. Guns generally aren't available to 99% of the people. Good luck finding one.
And when have I said in the entirety of this discussion that guns should not be generally available to everyone?
Okay, well, then you're arguing against the European-style system. Have you looked at the laws in those countries?
But when have I said that guns period, just guns, should not be widely available?
Why does that matter? First, we've got your fixation on certain types of guns. You yourself attempted to compare the United States for gun crime with Norway and other countries in Western Europe. Extreme development, largely homogenous societies, I would posit, by the way, but you don't want me to make the comparison with other societies with similar gun laws. Why is that? Unless you think the socioeconomic premise explains why there's a discrepancy in gun crime. Why would Mexico, with its particularly high gun control system, be demonstrably different? I would think it would be closer to the US. It's literally bordering it. It's in the Americas. It's got that more a non-homogeneous society. I would think that would be a more welcome fit than Norway. Why? I don't understand. Unless you think, well, the brown people are. You don't want the comparison because they've got high gun crime. Again, that's the truth. That's the answer.
Styx, please explain the AR is just a blacked out semi-auto hunting rifle.
Yeah, basically, it looks tactical and it's aesthetically based on military weaponry. Otherwise, it's just the same as any other semi-auto rifle.
The English lore.
But I think Jack, you didn't give Jack a chance to respond to the last one. What was it?
Okay, so the last one was, does Jack actually believe the current day woke as fuck trans-inclusive military wouldn't be wiped out by a militia?
I really just don't even know what to say to the transphobia of that comment, but I just...
But it's funny anyway.
Yeah, next over.